Yeah. Open source AI just became enterprise-grade Xaya 1.8b, proves you can build reasoning-level AI on 50K in AMD GPUs. Every SaaS company's moat just got thinner. That sentence should terrify every founder who built their Series A pitch around OpenAI's API. For the last 3 years, the playbook was simple. Wrap ChatGPT in a user interface, find a vertical, raise money, and enjoy margins that could hit 80%. The moat was clear. You didn't own the model, but you owned the distribution and domain expertise. The model itself? That was someone else's problem. But something shifted in late 2024, and most SaaS founders haven't internalized what it means. Open source reasoning models, not just language models, but actual reasoning models, started reaching parity with proprietary solutions. And crucially, they became deployable at scales that fit on a spreadsheet. A 50K infrastructure investment isn't nothing, but for a B2B SaaS company generating revenue, it's rounding error. It's 2 weeks of burn for a mid-stage startup. What we're witnessing is the collapse of a specific kind of moat, the one built purely on API access. When your competitive advantage is, we have a better wrapper around someone else's model, you're essentially renting value. And when your tenants can build their own house for the cost of a used car, your business model has a shelf life that's measured in quarters, not years. Let's ground this in what actually happened. Xaya 1.8b, released by researchers in the open source community, demonstrated reasoning capabilities that benchmarks suggest are competitive with GPT-4 level systems on certain classes of problems. The infrastructure required to run it inference-heavy isn't the latest H100. It's a cluster of AMD MI300X GPUs, commodity hardware by enterprise standards, available at scale, and economical enough that you can serve thousands of concurrent users without the math breaking. Then, look at what's happening upstream. Meta's been aggressively open-sourcing Llama. Open-source communities have released reasoning models. Mistral released models that challenge the OpenAI narrative, and the velocity of improvement in the open-source world has fundamentally changed. It's no longer a 2-year gap. It's months. But here's the part that matters more. Deployment economics have inverted. 3 years ago, running your own model at scale was capital-intensive and technically risky. You needed ML ops expertise. You needed to understand quantization, batch processing, and throughput optimization. Today, there are 7 different companies that will handle this as a managed service for you at a fraction of the cost of OpenAI's API prices. Replicate, Together AI, any scale. These aren't garage projects. They're enterprise-grade infrastructure, and the data is clear. A B2B SaaS company that was spending $5,000 a month on API calls can now spend $500 a month on inference and have 3 times the throughput. That's not a 10% margin improvement. That's a shift from API costs are a line item to API costs are rounding error. Not all SaaS is created equal. The disruption won't be evenly distributed. Categories built purely on API wrapping die first. Chatbot builders that just UI wrapper Claude or GPT-4. Customer support automation that's just prompt engineering on top of OpenAI. These aren't companies, they're features. And once you can run Xaya 1.8b in-house, they become features that cost a few $100s a month to operate, not thousands. What follows quickly? Any SaaS category where the value prop is primarily smarter language understanding. Content generation tools, writing assistants, code generation platforms that aren't Cursor or GitHub Copilot, document analysis, translation. If your moat was, we have access to the best model, it's not 2024 anymore. But something more subtle happens next. Categories where domain expertise matters, legal tech, medical imaging, financial analysis, face pressure from a different angle. The moat shifts from, we use the best model to, we have the best data and training pipeline. That's actually defensible. But the timeline matters. The company with proprietary fine-tuned models trained on 5 years of domain data still has an edge, but only if they move fast. A well-resourced competitor can catch up in months, not years. What changes slower or not at all? SaaS built on workflows, not models. The value isn't the AI. It's how the AI is integrated into a process. Notion's AI features are defensible not because they're technically superior, but because they're baked into a product that has switching costs. Same with HubSpot. Same with Figma. These companies can run open-source models and their margins still hold. The losers are clear. Any SaaS company funded in 2022 or 2023 that was built primarily on API economics faces compression. Your Series B valuation assumed API costs would stay at today's levels and that proprietary models would maintain a 2-year lead. Neither assumption holds. This is already visible. Companies like Jasper and Copy.ai that were valued at unicorn status 3 years ago are in quiet trouble. They're profitable, which is great. But their growth ceiling is lower, their margins are worse, and their acquisition cost economics are stretched. They'll survive, but at 1/10 the valuation multiple. The winners break into 2 groups. First, infrastructure companies. If you're running open-source models at scale, if you're a provider of cheap, reliable inference, you're going to win dramatically. Second, companies with embedded workflows and proprietary data. If your moat isn't the model but the context around it, you're fine. Better than fine. You can now run an open-source model in-house and pocket the margin that was previously going to OpenAI. There's a third, smaller winner category, companies that move fast enough to own the open-source distribution layer. This is the lesson from every other software disruption. The winners aren't always the original proprietors. They're whoever builds the best layer on top of the new substrate. If you're a founder building SaaS today, the implications are clear. First, don't build on API economics as your core value prop. If your entire company thesis is use GPT-4 but cheaper, you're building on the wrong foundation. You need a layer of value that's not replicable by running an open-source model in-house. Second, if you already have one, start thinking about your open-source strategy now. Can you run your own fine-tuned model? Can you build a data moat that makes your model irreplaceable, even if the base model is open source? The companies that move from API customer to model owner in the next 12 months will win. Third, if you're investing, be skeptical of any SaaS thesis predicated on proprietary model access. The lead is smaller than you think, and it's closing faster than historical precedent suggests. The risk-adjusted returns have deteriorated significantly. The future of SaaS isn't no moat, it's different moats. And those moats are about data, workflow, and user lock-in, not model ownership. The companies that understand that distinction will navigate what's coming. The ones that don't will be compressed. Follow for more on the future of AI and business.